Hey guys, thanks for joining me today on Dynamo BIM. On this episode of Dynamo Shorts, we're going to be talking about renumbering elements in, of course, a logical and smart way. So today, I'm going to be working in the sample file. You guys can follow along if you want. And I'm going to be numbering furniture. But you guys can number any category of elements you want. I additionally will be numbering them based off of the level they fall on. But once again, you could fall on any parameter. You could say you want to number them based off the description that they have, whatever it might be. Okay, so with that being said, I am going to create a schedule because the schedule isn't much unlike what we're actually going to be doing within Dynamo. We're just going to be doing additional things within Dynamo that you can't really do within a schedule. But to start, we're going to come in, go look at view, schedule quantities. And just like within Dynamo, we're going to specify what category of elements we want to look at. So in this specific scenario, once again, I'm going to look at furniture and I'm going to call this guy by level because I'm going to look at what level these elements are on. Hit OK. Now, just like in Dynamo, I'm going to tell it what fields or what parameters I want to look at and group by, right? So level and count. It's really all I need to know for this specific scenario. Group them by level. Tell them not to itemize every instance. So essentially I'll get multiple items on one row rather than each item represented on its own unique row. So when I hit OK, you'll see I have 75 furniture elements on my 0-1 entry level and 29 furniture elements on my 0-3 floor level. So essentially what I want to do is I want to take the level and create a prefix. So all of the furniture elements that fall on my 0-1 entry level will have a prefix of 1 dash. 0-3 floor will be 3 dash. And I'll do this within Dynamo by creating a dictionary. Then the essentially secondary part of the numbering sequence will be a range that I create based off of how many elements there are. So I'll go from 0-0-1 on level 0-1 entry level to 0-75 and on 0-3 floor to 0-29. So essentially my new number value, which I'll feed into the mark value for my furniture, will be 5 characters long. 2 characters for my level prefix, the number and a dash, and then 3 characters for the actual number that's being associated to them after the level prefix. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and open up Dynamo, which I have here. You can find that within the Manage tab in Revit. Comes with Revit, so you should have it. I'm going to go ahead and create a new Dynamo script. Now, I am actually going to use the library here on the left-hand side a little bit more. I did not use it in episode 1. Make sure you go and check that episode out if you have not already. But essentially, as I mentioned, I'm going to be looking for all of the elements in the category of furniture within my Revit model, just like I did within the Revit schedule, right? So essentially, to do that, I'm going to look for the node called Categories. And once again, type it up here within my library search. And the beautiful thing about doing this is that the library search gives me a little bit more information than just right-clicking and searching within my canvas. You'll see some things here within my node information, such as the name, a little pretty graphic to represent what that does, in addition to what library package that comes from. So you can see that this top one here, Categories, comes from the Revit package under the subcategory of Selection. And you can actually see when I hover over Selection, it actually gives me this little pointer. I can click on Selection, and that will actually take me to the category of Revit Selection, where that node lives. So I can start to look at other Revit selection nodes that are grouped within the same subcategory of the Revit package. So you can see here, I have all elements of categories. I have all elements of family type, all elements of type, all elements at level, right? So a lot of different ways that we can select elements. In this specific scenario, once again, just like my schedule, I'm going to go with categories. I'm going to specify furniture. This scenario, you can use any category that you'd like. Maybe you want to update light fixtures or whatever it might be. There aren't any light fixtures in this specific Revit model, but any particular set of elements that you have within your Revit model can be numbered in the same way, similar way, most likely, if not the exact same. So once I have my category specified for furniture, I want to get all elements of that category, which essentially a schedule just does automatically. I'm going to wire my category to my category, and you can start to see under the drop down of the node that I get 104 furniture elements, right? 75 on my entry level and 29 on my 03 floor level. So once I have all of these elements, just like my schedule, I'm going to start to look at the parameter value of what level it's on, right? Just like in my schedule, I was looking at fields. I'm going to pull the parameter. So to do this, I'm going to look at the element parameter value. So a little bit of a trick here, element dot get parameter value by name, and that will actually pull up this Revit element node. So once again, I'm going to click on element just so that I can start to see all of the data within the typical Revit element package here that I can start to look at. So, is it joined? What's the geometry? Get the location, get the materials, right? You can set the location, set the parameter name, right? I want to get the parameter name, but we will set the parameter name later, right? Once we actually create the number sequence, we're going to set that to the mark value. So I'll throw this node in later. But here, I'm going to go ahead and feed my elements to my element. And my parameter name here, you can see if I hover over these inputs, it starts to tell me what it's looking for. So this says the name of the parameter whose value you want to obtain. And this is actually a string. It's looking for a name or a string of characters, right? So I can right click and look for string and just type in level. Now, with parameter values, they are very case sensitive. You have to type them in exactly. So capital L, make sure I get that wired correctly. And you can see here that Revit actually gives me an element, right? Very similar to what happened in episode 1. If you haven't looked at that, once again, go and check that out. But you can see here, it tells me that these furniture elements are associated to a level, which is also an element in Revit, right? It has its own element ID. Well, now I want to group these elements based off of what level they're on, just like my schedule, right? So reminiscent. I keep saying that. But once again, it's not unlike what we just did within that schedule, right? We're very familiar with creating schedules in Revit. Dynamo isn't very much unlike that. I usually will tell my Revit users or people I'm training to basically, once you master schedules, it's a great time to start getting into Dynamo, because then you can start to make mass changes even on a much grander scale than a schedule can, like we're doing now. So essentially, to group these elements based off the level that they're on, I want to just come into the search and search for group. And you can see here that there is group by key. And this is actually under the list organized area. Pretty intuitive, right? I'm actually going to just show you within the library without searching. I'm going to go to list and organize. And that's where that node is, right? Group by key. And you can see here, it tells me group items into sublists based on their key values. So my list would be the elements. I'm going to move these guys up a little bit so that I have a little bit of a cleaner script here. And then my key would be the level they're on, right? just like my schedule. If I come into grouping and sorting, I am sorting by level. Level is the key in which I am grouping this schedule by, right? So just like that within Dynamo, I can actually say, get all of my elements and group them by the level they're on. Now to look at the groups and the unique keys, I'm actually going to right click and bring in a watch node so that we can actually see the groups that have been created in addition to the unique keys that they're essentially being grouped by. Now I essentially held onto the node and hold control and drag the node. That allows you to duplicate a node just like within Revit, right? If you hold a column and you hold control and you drag on that column or any other element within Revit, it will duplicate it, right? So you can see here that I have my levels, my 2 levels, 0, 1 entry level and 3 floor. And all of my elements have been grouped based off of those 2 levels. Now this is a really important Dynamo element here, Dynamo facet. Essentially what we have now is a list of lists, right? So you can see here that I have a list of elements. This is what's referred to as list levels. I have my first level, which is just 2 lists, right? 2 items. And then my second level would be the items within those lists, right? And because we've already looked at the schedule, we know that in my first list, I have 75 elements. Dynamo starts at 0. So you can always add 1 to that last number. 75 because I have 75 furniture elements on my 0, 1 entry level. And then in the second list, I have 29 elements because I have 29 elements on my 0, 3 floor level, right? So essentially, I've just recreated what's happening within the Revit schedule, right? I've gotten all of my furniture elements based off of the category. I've gotten the level value, and I've grouped them based off of their level. Pretty straightforward. Now this script is going to get a little bit cumbersome, so I'm going to start to group my nodes together so that as we continue on, it doesn't get really, really messy and really hard to read. And this really helps, not only when I share the script with all of you, but also later when I want to go look at this script or edit it or revise it in any way. Maybe I want to number elements based off of a different value or in a different scenario. I want to have 4 characters rather than 3. Whatever it might be, it's really easy for me to come in here and look at it and see what's going on, make the changes I need. So the first thing, I am actually going to group this category node and make it pink because this isn't a node that can be interfaced with. You as the user could come in here and change what category you want to update. So I'm going to say specify category to be updated. Then I can go ahead and group these guys and say group elements based off parameter. And I'm actually going to remove this string value from the group because this also could be changed. Create this group, make this pink, and say specify parameter to group by. Now, I will say that in this specific scenario, this needs to be an instance parameter. We would need 1 additional node to get the type of furniture element to be able to interface with the type parameters. So this specific scenario will be working with a instance parameter. Now, in this specific scenario, this drives me crazy. These words are broken. So I'm actually going to hit Control W to bring in a note. And I'm just going to clear that note value and add this to the group by selecting both, right-clicking on the note and adding it to the group so that now it's a little bit cleaner, right? It's a little bit easier to read, not broken words. So we have 2 input nodes so far. You can specify the category and specify what you want to group it by. Then I have these 2 watch nodes, which are basically just telling me the unique keys and the groups that have been grouped by that key or those keys, right? So I'll create this group and I'll just call this reporting, right? Because this as a user allows me to identify what's exactly happening, right? This is kind of the schedule output within Dynamo, if you will. All right. So now that I have my script somewhat organized here, I can start to further develop this number that I want to create. So once again, I want to create a prefix 1 dash and 3 dash based off of the level these elements fall on. So what I'm going to do is actually create a dictionary within Dynamo. And you can see here that the very, very top of my library is dictionary. Open that up. And you can say I can create a dictionary by key values. So I'm going to move this down here for a little bit and we're going to talk about this. So dictionary by key values. So you can see here the string of keys of the dictionary. So essentially, what is it that you as these elements are going to define what value you're going to give it? In this specific scenario, I have level names, which are going to produce the prefix, right? So you can see once again, the string keys. So I'm going to use a string value. And you can copy these from your Revit model, right? I can just maybe even use the level name from the floor plan name, right? So I have my 01 entry level, use my control drag, and 03 floor, right? Rename that, copy that, paste it here. Because once again, they do need to match exactly, okay? So to put these key values into this single input, what I need to do is actually create a list. So I'm actually going to look under list and generate. And you can see here, I can do a list create. Add an input here because I have 2 items to add to this list. And you can see here that now I have both of those items within this single list in this output. So I can feed this list to the string keys of the dictionary. So now I have my key values defined. Now I need to tell Dynamo what I want the values to be defined for these that are found, right? What are the values that you want to assign to the furniture based off of these level names? Well, first I want to do 1 dash for level 1 and 3 dash for level 3, right? Once again, create my list, input my 2 values. And so now I have my 2 values that I'm going to assign to my elements based off of the level key values that are found. So I'm going to put my list into my values, and you can see here that it creates my dictionary. Okay, so every time that it finds 03 floor, it will give the 3 dash, and every time I get the 01 entry level, I get the 1 dash. I'm going to go ahead and group these guys. I like my dictionaries to be purple and call this a dictionary from level names. Okay, so now I have my dictionary. Now I need to get the level names from the elements and then set the value from the dictionary. Okay, so what I'm going to do, you can see under dictionary at the very top again, you can actually see that you can value at key, right? So we can get the value based off of the dictionary. So we're going to feed dictionary to dictionary. And now we need to get the key to obtain, right, from my elements. So I have my elements here, right? They're my unique elements from my groups. So I'm going to ask them again what their level is. So I'm going to copy my element.get parameter value, but ask my groups what their level is. And you can see I don't actually need to change the input because it's still asking for level, right? So now you can see I get all of the level names from the groups. Now you're like, well, Dana, you already did that. Well, once again, this is that fundamental piece of Dynamo. I have forced these elements into groups. And now that they're grouped, I can start to assign them their values. These list levels are incredibly important to maintain at this point, so that my groups for my level 1 furniture elements and my 03 furniture elements remain grouped together, so that I can treat them as a group. And we'll see that in a minute when I start numbering them based off their range. So now that I have their levels, now I need to get these level names, right? Because this is not my value that's the key, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for the element.name. And if you remember in episode 1, where we outsmart the view filters, we did this with our view phases as well, or our element phase created data, right? We asked those elements, what's the phase name of when you were created? So now I get the element name of my levels, because the levels are an element as well. They have their own element ID. So now you can see that my values here match my key values. So I can put these values into my key. Feed that into my key, and look at that. Now, rather than representing what level they're on and what the level name is, I actually get the 1- prefix and the 3- prefix based off of the dictionary that I have set. And as we add levels, as we, add furniture to additional levels, what have you, we can add additional strings and items to our list so that, 02 floor level can also be considered here. Okay, so now we have our prefixes. Now we need to add this value or concatenate this value to the number range that we create. So essentially, now I want to grab these elements, and I'm going to go ahead and group this first so that once again, as we move along, it's nice and orderly. So dictionary value based off, I guess I can just leave dictionary value for elements. So now we have the dictionary value. Now we need to start to look at our groups and count the amount of elements in each of one of those groups. Because essentially what I want to do is create a range of numbers based off of how many there are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for list.count. And essentially count how many elements are in these lists. Now you can see here when I run this, it tells me that I have two elements. And the reason that is because there are 2 lists within this output. Now, once again, fundamentals of Dynamo. This is where we get into list levels. Once again, I don't want to look at this first list level. I actually want to look at the list of lists, right? So I actually want to look at the second level in of my lists. So you can see that on my list.count, there's this little arrow next to the input, and I can actually click on that and say, use levels. And when I do that, it allows me to tell this node which level to look at. So by looking at the list level 2, it's actually looking at the list within the list. It's not looking at that first list, it's looking at the secondary list, which is the sublist of the first list. Super confusing, I know. But you can see here that now it is counting how many elements are in each one of those lists. Super fundamental piece of Dynamo. We're going to talk about this in later episodes of Dynamo Shorts, promise. But you can see here that now I have 75 in that first group, which we know because we have 75 furniture elements on our 0-1 entry level and 29 elements on our 0-3 floor. So now I'm going to use some mathematical functions to essentially create a number based off of how many it found. So I'm going to look in the search here for range. And you can see that the first thing here is list generate for range. So you can see I get a start, where you want to start your numbering at, where you want to end the sequence at, and where you want to step. Well, I want to end at the count, right? I want to end at 75 and 29. I want to start at 1. So I'm not going to use that. I'm actually going to use right click and use a number for 1. Input that into my start. And you can actually see that it defaults at a step of 1. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Because I'm starting at 1 and ending at 75 and 29. So I should get 2 lists going from 1, 2, 3, all the way to 75 in my first list and 29 in my second list. So let's see what it outputs here. And there we go. So I get 1 through 75 and 1 through 29. Now, once again, I want all of these numbers to be the same length. So what do I need to do is actually pad these characters with a 0 to the left, right? So it doesn't become 100, it becomes 001. So I need to pad some zeros to the left of these characters. So I'm going to look up pad. And you can see the very first thing that comes up is pad left. So now one thing here, this is looking for a string. If I feed this sequence in here, it's actually going to give me a warning because these are numbers. These are strings. We'll see the warning. I'll tell you guys about it, and then we'll talk about how we can work through that. So the width that we want to create, and you can actually see that this is looking for an integer. So an integer is just a whole number. So I'll duplicate my number node, and I actually want to create 3 characters. And what do you want to pad it with? Now this is looking for a string. So I'm going to right click, look for string, and I want to pad it with zeros. Now, once again, we're getting a warning, and we know why, right? Because these are numbers, and this is looking for a string. So let's see what Dynamo tells us for this warning. It's a little bit confusing, but we're going to walk through it. It says string.padLeft expects a string, an integer, and a string, but you input an integer, and a string. So we are feeding it, once again, as I mentioned before, numbers when this is looking for characters. That's what a string is. It's just a string of characters that are assembled together. So essentially, I need to convert these values to strings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say string from, and you can see it says string from object. So convert an object to a string. So convert these numbers to a string value. Doesn't look any different. But in the interface, in terms of the data that's being reported, these are numbers, these are characters. It's kind of like this is a number value, this is a character value. Even though we're putting in numbers, Dynamo is reporting them very differently. So now when I input this string to string, my warning goes away and I get all of my numbers padded with a 0 so that they are 3 characters long. Magic. All right, once again, gonna take a minute here to organize this node. I don't like having any overlaps or anything weird. A little bit of an OCD, but once again, this is gonna help me so much down the line when I wanna edit this script, right? When I wanna know what I did in the future, edit it for a different use, whatever it might be. So I'm gonna create in range from count, right? Okay. So now I have my 5 characters, right? I have my prefix and I also have the range that I created. So essentially, I want to add this value to this value. And because these are strings, when I add them together, they're going to concatenate them together, right? So they're not being treated as numbers. They're being treated as characters. So if I come in here and I add, just type in the plus sign, you can see there's a math operator for add. And I want to add first my prefix, so that to X, then my number range. And you can see, there we go. I have 1-001 all the way down to 1-075. And then for my third floor, I have 3-001 all the way down to 3-029. There we go. So now we've created our numbering, right? Based off of the level dictionary prefix, as well as the range that we've created from the count that we have. Now we want to set this value that we've created back to the elements, to their mark value. So once again, I'm going to come and look for elements.set parameter value by name. Once again, that's under Revit element, right? So I could have actually just gone to the Revit category under elements and element to element.set parameter value by name. So now we know these guys are our elements. This group is our elements. Then we want to specify the parameter name, and we know these are our values, right? So for the parameter name, I'm going to do something very similar to this. Specify instance parameter to set, right? So I'm just going to copy that over here, update my group name to set, and say update mark. So once I update this, we're going to see all of our mark values update. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add my mark value to my schedule. I'm going to tell these things to itemize so that I see each item individually, and then sort them by mark as well so that I can start to see them organized by mark. So when I run this, mark to parameter name, look there. We have all of our elements numbered based off of the number and range that we created. And if we go back to our plan and select on a piece of furniture here, maybe go to a furniture plan where I can actually see furniture. Maybe I can see them in the gross building. Yep. You can see here that my mark values have been updated. Thank you guys so much for joining me today on Dynamo BIM. I hope that you can use this for your own need and renumbering and making your Revit workflows much more efficient.